Welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week. I'm Dee.
And I'm DJ. We're two therapists who like to dive deep into everything from mental health to politics, voting, and whatever else is going on in the world.
We're here to have real conversations about life, the issues that matter, and how it all affects us. Because let's face it, there's always something more to talk about.
Exactly. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join us as we break it all down.
We'll catch you up on the big stuff, the personal stuff, and the things you didn't even know that you needed to think about.
And when we run out of time,
we'll pick this up next week. So, Dr. DJ, the Supreme Court just weighed in on conversion therapy, which is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. Yeah, we've been seeing a lot from the kind of governing and licensing boards, who decide ethical standards and guidelines for therapists, counselors, social works, psychiatrists, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I want to zoom out. So let's talk about what conversion therapy is, because I think people may not, may not fully understand, because to not understand what it is, it could be, I don't want people who aren't in the field to just think of well, this must be an unethical practice. That's why the Supreme Court said don't do it anymore. But let's talk about what conversion therapy actually is. The whole premise of conversion therapy is to convert a person who is under the LGBTQ umbrella. So they're considering their gender, they're considering their sexuality, that may be something other than hetero and maybe something other than straight, and converting that person to a person who is hetero and is straight.
Or cisgender.
Yeah, sorry. Or cisgender. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mixed up my gender terms. But yeah. So it's trying to convert them into a person who is a straight cisgender individual, which basically likens being LGBTQ and being queer to a choice. And we know it's not a choice to be queer.
Right.
So
because of research, that's how we know. It's not just anecdotally, based on just therapists who are like, this is my opinion. It's based on bodies of research.
Yeah, this is legitimately facts and not feelings of, what we know to be true about queerness. So conversion therapy is pretty problematic and also not effective.
Right. Yeah. And I think okay, so let's stick to that layer, because I already have so many layers that are coming up. So if we stick to that layer of conversion therapy and what it is, it's based on the principles of the people around the kid user. We're talking about kids here, conversion therapy, right? It could happen with the grown-ups, but the arguments that we hear are basically kids 18 and under whose parents have beliefs that this is wrong. And so they want to bring their kids to a therapist or an inpatient or residential treatment to convert them back to, being cisgender or straight. So that's basically the premise, is that the kid says, hey, mom, dad, I think I'm, gay, queer, whatever. And the parents say, absolutely not. That is against our beliefs. We're going to go get you help. We know somebody like Bobby thought he was gay and his parents took him to conversion therapy and now he's not gay anymore, and so that's the premise that they used, and again, I have other layers because I think, Bobby was afraid. And so Bobby was like, I can't say that I'm gay. So that's what kids learn generally, right? Is that they don't get to be who they are versus they got converted, right? So that's the premise of it. Again, I have already so many other things that I'm holding over here that that I want to point to.
Yeah, and it's to that point of conversion therapy isn't effective in the way that it doesn't actually make whomever, cis and straight. What it does is it teaches them the way that they are is not okay, which is the complete opposite goal of therapy. The goal of therapy is to feel okay or to change behaviors to make you feel better and make you feel more congruent with yourself. And conversion therapy basically says you're not accepted. So the people who are, quote, successful in conversion therapy quite usually are kids who are just not going to, shame themselves into being
Right.
straight or not just deciding, well, I just can't tell people anymore and I'll just have
Right.
to live this lie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think, when people, I said, that it's not just based on anecdotal stories, that it's based on research and stuff. But there are, and I know because I've seen them, we rely so much on social media now, like especially like TikTok for, younger people. And there are, some people on there who are detransitioners or former
Mm.
gays who have big followings on on TikTok or Instagram or such. And, those people are pointed to as, you see, like it can work, people who were converted, either by conversion therapy or church or whatnot. And so a lot of times that's the evidence, and the people who are speaking at these like rallies and conferences and stuff, or where people are pointing to the harms of I keep doing quotes when I'm saying like harms
Yeah.
and stuff, of being queer.
Yeah, so it's that vocal
Hmm.
minority that have unfortunately picked up steam of,
Right.
but that's that is the strong minority of experiences.
Right.
And
Right.
I won't even get into how,
The
you
whys.
know, the whys and how a lot of people serve the algorithm versus,
Right.
whatever. That's a topic. That's something to pick up next week. That's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what actually happened in this, the reason it was in front of the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
um, is in Colorado. I don't know if it was a counselor, a therapist, somebody, licensed
Hmm.
professional said it violated her First Amendment to not be able to practice conversion therapy because the state had banned conversion therapy. So sued the state. It got put up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said the ban on conversion therapy is illegal and put it back to the lower courts.
Hmm.
The Supreme Court didn't effectively say conversion therapy is okay everywhere now, but what
Hmm.
essentially happened is now there's precedent. So anywhere else that there is any type of lawsuit
Right.
or what will be forthcoming
Right.
will likely result in, because many states have banned conversion therapy
Hmm.
because it increases suicide rates of teens.
Right.
It increases poor mental health outcomes. It does
Hmm.
awful things. Like it
Right.
doesn't work and it makes kids want to die. Like
Right.
quite literally.
Right.
Children
And
die.
again, right. And again, based on, data, that
Mhm.
we have these facts, and we know we're not just saying,
Yeah.
this is just some stories. It's based
Mhm.
on like research and, measurable data. But I think too, like the Supreme Court, ruling says, and which I find honestly the most troublesome part of this argument, and, and I'm quite surprised actually that I don't hear a lot about this actual part, which is that the Supreme Court said that that a state cannot ban conversion therapy because the argument was a First Amendment argument. The therapist
Mhm.
said, this is my First Amendment right. I should be able to say, I believe that conversion therapy is appropriate. I should be able to do conversion therapy because that is my First Amendment right, because the ruling is saying that therapy is speech, therefore can be regulated by the First Amendment. And so that that opens up a whole other real can of worms, because therapists are governed by like ACA ethical standards, or whatever the social work
Mhm.
board, whatever the licensing board is, or the governing board for whoever professional license. There are ethical standards that say that therapists do not get to impose their values onto other clients, and or onto their clients. It's not about your free speech, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a professor. You teach. We teach
Mhm.
other students, master level students who are studying to be counselors, and I mean, that's something that we would always teach, is that you don't get to
Yeah.
impose your values on your clients. You can
Because it's
believe
not
it,
about us. In the
right?
therapy room, it's not
Right.
about us.
And so the thing is that they're not saying like medical interventions are conduct based. And so the Supreme Court would not take up likely wouldn't take up. A doctor can't say, I don't believe in this intervention, therefore I don't think you should get it, and I'm not doing it, because they see that as conduct based. Whereas therapy is words, words is speech, and therefore this person should have the right to speak their beliefs, which is counter to what again we believe. So I honestly, when I
Yeah.
first saw this case and that it was going to go to the Supreme Court, I was surprised. And then I thought they're never going to take it up because this has nothing to do with the First Amendment. A therapist doesn't get to it's not a debate room. That's not what it's about. And so it blows my mind that they even took the case and made a ruling that said Colorado cannot ban conversion therapy because conversion therapy is against the First Amendment.
Well, it wildly downplays what therapy is. Therapy may seem like talking because it's two individuals talking for the most part.
Right.
Obviously, lots of other therapeutic approaches, but it's not just, if therapy were just speech, that's called a friendship. Like, that's just communicating with a person. Like, we are medical professionals trained to do specific things, including having an effective evidence-based treatment plan. If you do any type of therapy, you have to have some sort of treatment plan that shows what are the ultimate goals that you're working towards. Therapy isn't a client comes and sits with me and we just gab for 53 minutes. Like, that's not what therapy is. Therapy is utilizing interventions. And so to liken it to it's only about free speech, I mean, that is to completely disregard who we are as professionals.
Right. It is. And, and that again opens up the whole argument about how our profession has not carried as much weight, as the medical profession. Like even, well, I mean, I could say like so many different boards. And what I think is good, and I have pointed this out to you before we started, is that, all of the governing boards are saying like ACA, APA, all the like SAGE, who I'm part of, who is the Alliance for like queer therapists.
To clarify what those are real quick, the ACA is the American Counseling Association. They may not govern. ACA is for counselors. NASW is the National Association for Social Work. They don't give us licenses. That's at the state level. However, they govern nationally what are evidence-based practices. They provide our code of ethics, which we'll talk about here in a bit. Like, they're the ones ultimately who determine our code of conduct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dee. And in the American Psychiatric Association.
Yes,
so
is APA. Yeah.
APA. So also not only did ACA say, hey, we do not, conversion therapy is not okay. We do not stand behind this. There were a lot of statements that were brought out yesterday. The ACA did also. Which I think is helpful because psychiatrists are medical practitioners and that, it's always an argument I stand against, but I mean, that is what carries more weight, and again, like if we look at conduct, they would say that medically, we would look at this as a conduct argument. But yeah, you're right, evidence-based, but you hear it all the time. I mean, when I see somebody for a consultation or for a first session, and I always ask, what is your background for therapy? And often they've had many counselors or therapists before. And they'll say like, well, I've done a lot of talk therapy. And you'll even see that on the platforms, talk therapy. And, and I say like, what kind of therapy did you do? Because like most of us are talking, and even if you're using like somatic based practices, you're still using your words a lot to like guide someone through. So like talk therapy, but that's the thing, is like it gets so minimized to like, well, I've done a lot of talk therapy. That doesn't mean you haven't done any work. That doesn't mean that you were just chit chatting.
Likely your therapist was using interventions like that you just don't know that it's an intervention. Yeah.
So I mean, that's the thing, is that that term gets so just thrown out there as if we're just talking. Like I'm just nodding and like being like, okay, yeah, I'm glad you did that.
And how does that make you feel?
Right. Yeah. And again, like even if a therapist was only using person-centered therapy or person-centered therapy, it's not therapy. Person-centered therapy,
Person-centered
yeah.
counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if they're using that intervention, which is I think the a lot of the foundations of what we use,
Yeah.
they're still doing something.
And so to break that down, so person-centered counseling is used to be called Rogerian on
Right, because
the
Carl
Wayback Train, but
Rogers.
Carl Rogers hated that it was called Rogerian.
Did he? I'm not
He did.
surprised.
He was
Yeah.
like, it's not about him, it's about the
I know.
person.
Yeah.
That's why it was about person, just like about that person. So person-centered therapy, like DJ said, really makes up the foundation of many other therapy practices, although it's not like explicit. But as
Right.
therapists, we are taught many person-based things, such as having unconditional positive regard for our
Unconditional
clients,
positive regard. Yeah.
that we regard them with respect and dignity and autonomy. That's the basis of every therapeutic relationship. Person-centered shortcomings is it doesn't really have direct interventions.
Right.
So that's kind of where I think some people think of like, oh, talk therapy versus very intensive
Yes.
interventions are interventions like EMDR or DBT. Like those are very specific. You know that you're doing those interventions
Right.
and everything else kind of falls. Yeah. And a lot of other things kind of fall in the middle. And like you said, somatic based, talking about different body parts and pieces of yourself, like that's still talk therapy, but it's very intervention based.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, but I do think that term just gets thrown out there,
Yeah.
so much. And so again, like how this came to be, how this argument of that a therapist, counselor, I'm not sure. I did not look at this person's license, and I'm surprised that I didn't. But
I had an article pulled up about it. I'll check.
that somebody can just be like, that is against my First Amendment right. And I almost think too that it looked like she was framing the argument as if she couldn't talk about it, any other things, which is not technically true. If a person themselves comes into therapy and they say, "Hey, I think that I might be gay. It doesn't align with my religious beliefs. I'm feeling a lot of strife about this and I don't know what to do." A therapist wouldn't be, "Oh, we don't do conversion therapy."
Because that's not conversion therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't do conversion therapy. So then that means I have to tell you have to be gay. And it felt like that was what her argument was saying, that she couldn't even talk about the opposite point of view, which is not true. If the client wants to talk about the opposite point of view, or if they want to know, if they want to talk through all the points, obviously you can do that. You do not. The conversion therapy ban wasn't if someone comes into you and they think they might be gay, that you have to convert them to be gay, or tell them that like when you leave this office, you very well must be gay. Like that's not the case either, right? Again, whatever their goals are, if someone says, "I don't think I can live my life that way," we obviously would support that in therapy.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And the person was a licensed counselor. We've talked about
Yeah.
it on the show before. Many therapists were counselors, were social workers, psychologists.
Psychologists.
Yeah, I tend to throw around therapist, but this person was a licensed counselor.
Yeah, and I think I use therapist as a broader word too, because I think people more talk about it that way. But not when I'm teaching, because I'm teaching counselors, so then
And you
I
have to
say
be,
counselors.
yes, you want professional pride, but also when you're talking to, a larger group. But yeah, so our code of ethics, like we mentioned, really governs who we have to be as professionals, even if it's not necessarily our largest priorities. So like, for example, the American Counseling Association has key principles in their code of ethics. And actually, last code of ethics came out in 2014. They're currently writing the latest version.
They are. I got a thing
so
to
counselors
review.
Yeah, so counselors who are listening, go and submit your feedback for the new code of ethics. That's how we inform the field. But as it stands, we have, I think it's 5 principles, and that includes justice, autonomy, non-malfeasance, beneficence, and I think there is a fifth that I'm 100% forgetting.
God, I had to do this so many
Justice?
times.
Did I say justice already?
Yeah, you did say justice, and I
Okay.
should be able to know which one they're the Belmont principles.
Yeah.
And in my PhD program, I had to recertify in the Belmont principles every year. That meant it took me 6 years to get my PhD. So that meant 6 times that I had to recertify in the Belmont principles. But from 1970 something, I think they've been around for a long time. I should know it by heart, Dee, as many times as I had to recertify.
And I don't know why it's not like
Mhm.
the preamble, yada,
And
yada.
it came
Okay.
from a whole Belmont. It was a big thing that was happening back.
I literally have this on I don't know, several of my professional presentations. Autonomy, non-malfeasance, beneficence, justice, and fidelity.
Fidelity.
That's the 5th one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and every single, like DJ said, every single body, American Counseling Association, National Association for Social Workers, American Psychological Association, and then all of the interest groups like SAGE that have professional interests but aren't necessarily our governing authority per se. They've all come out and have reaffirmed that it is unethical to practice conversion therapy. So even if the Supreme Court or whoever says, yes, you can, there's plenty of things that are legal that are not ethical, right? If I, cut someone off in traffic and flip them the bird, right? Technically, as long as I didn't cut them off in a way that would violate traffic laws, what I'm doing is legal. But is it ethical, right? You start to get into these dicey areas. So our roles as professionals is to determine what's ethical and what's legal and operate in that overlap, which it's not a perfect overlap. There's plenty of things. And then if you work for an agency, you have to consider your agency requirements in there as well. For example, I worked for a company where they said you couldn't establish a relationship with a client, any type of relationship, not necessarily romantic, but any type of any type of relationship, friendship, romantic, financial, whatever, with a client until they were no longer a client for 1 year. Well, our code of ethics says, is it 5 years?
I think it's
7 years? 2 years? See, I don't know because
mine is once a client, always a client.
Exactly. The law does not specify anything, but our codes of ethics do. And then ultimately, then we have our own morals and obligations where I'm very similar. Once a client, always a client. I don't feel I can establish a mutual relationship with a person who once was a client, even if I think they're a killer person, even if I think that they're just, a person I'd love to be friends with. It doesn't matter. Our relationship was hierarchical and we can't go back from that.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, that is. And then like you pointed out, we have maybe even different individual ethical standards. But if those individual ethical standards are different, they should differ to the point of more, right?
You have to default to the most stringent.
Yeah. You can't, I have different ethical standards that are less than what the ethical guidelines and rules are. But you're right. Go ahead.
Just always operate at that highest. So again, if it's the agency, my values, the law says I can be friends with them even while they're my client. There's nothing that says that I can't start a counseling relationship. It's not illegal.
No, Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
It is unethical and violates my own personal ethics on top of that.
Right, exactly. And ethics, it does hold up. We can make ethical complaints, and the board could say you violated ethical standards, therefore we can take your license away and you can't. So you're not going to go to jail, but you're never going to practice again. It's the same. If I have clients most of my clients, I live in Oregon. Most of my clients live in California. I use my California license to see those clients. And if they come to Oregon, I can't see them because because they're not in California. They have to be in California when I see them. And like that is like governed by, again, like, is it against the law? And those are like state guidelines. So even outside of just like the ACA, whatever, like some states do have, some states, not all states, have guidelines about what it means
like
to
the
be a
jurisdiction
practicing,
and yeah.
right? Yeah. And also like if they were like, hey, I'm in Oregon, I know you can't do a session with me, but do you want to grab a cup of coffee? I'm not going to go to jail if I did that, but that is going to compromise the relationship. And I would say like, no, I can't get,
Yeah.
no way, like, yes, I understand that you're here. I want to keep our relationship. It's very important that our relationship stays professional. And, I cannot meet you out for a cup of coffee. But those are like, again, ethical standards. And we really do abide by those.
And I don't know. I don't know how the state boards are going to go because ultimately the state boards are the one. ACA, you can submit a complaint to like ACA or NASW and they can investigate it. But ultimately, because our licenses reside with the state makes the final determination if we're licensed or not, or if we have any type of penalty. And I would be fascinated to see how this works. Like, for example, I live in Ohio, practice in Ohio. Ohio has banned conversion therapy, but I'd be curious now that there's this precedent if a lawsuit comes forward that attempts to change that. And let's say, it's no longer ethical to, or no longer illegal to not practice conversion therapy. Would we see licensure complaints that result in people losing their license or requiring additional trainings before practicing or additional supervision? There's lots of things the board can do. They can take away your license, they can suspend it, they can require additional supervision, training, yada yada.
Yeah, it's not black or white. And it's interesting that you brought up Ohio specifically. And I actually just upgraded my license from LPC, which is not an independent
Which is
license in
dependent.
Ohio.
Yeah.
To the LPCC in Ohio since I'm getting ready to move back. But there are a lot of laws that are happening in Ohio currently that could make it realistic that if this is an argument that's happening, right, that the Supreme Court says there's not a ban, I think there are a lot of laws in Ohio that could point to this could be a possible state argument, given that like right now in the Ohio House passed a ban on public performances of drag, but they really passed a ban on public display of dressing as the opposite gender, which that opens up like, that reminds me back in the 1950s when women couldn't wear
when you
dresses.
were 40 back then.
But when women couldn't wear dresses, right? Back in those days. So like, who decides what is opposite gender
women
dress?
had to wear dresses, you mean?
Yes, women had to wear dresses. Who decides what is opposite gender dress? They can, how do you, who's enforcing these laws? And what says that now that what is the appropriate clothing to wear? So anyways, that's a whole thing that's happening in Ohio. It hasn't passed through the Senate yet, but as we saw with the bathroom bans, because people who are not biologically of one gender can't use a different bathroom of their biological gender, and state agencies and universities and schools and stuff in Ohio. So there's a lot of laws and things that are happening in Ohio that I don't think it would be outside the realm of possibilities, because I thought the Supreme Court would never take this case, that this could not be a case that is brought to Ohio to say that conversion therapy could stand. We could see that.
Yeah. And I would have a hard time thinking there's going to be another case in front of the Supreme Court that challenges it. It was an 8-1 decision, that's a very strong, we don't normally see that strong of decisions, especially with how polarized in general the Supreme Court is. So it was surprising to me that it passed with that little dissent.
Right.
That was troubling to me.
Right. And again, the First Amendment, like the overreach for that, because if I'm a therapist that believes that my client, should be doing this because that's my values, conversion therapy is just one thing. Like you should be a religion, right? I believe that if I am, Christian faith or Jewish faith or whatever my faith is, that you should also be that. I should be able to talk about that. That's my First Amendment right. I mean, there's so many things that can just
Yeah.
like that a counselor could challenge, because if they say that's my First Amendment right to be able to do that, it's mind blowing to me. No matter how much research I've done on this, and I started doing research on this like when I first saw this case, and I cannot wrap my head around how the Supreme Court didn't just say, again, I hear they say because it's speech and not conduct, and that's just wild to me. Because again, how serious our profession is taken if we're just talking.
And it doesn't protect the ultimate consumer of therapy. Like, to your point
Right.
about like religion, if a client wants to come to me and talk about religion, absolutely. And there are therapists out there who practice specifically. You can get a degree in pastoral counseling,
Right.
and that can be your expertise. But that still doesn't mean, even if you are a person with pastoral counseling, if a client comes to you and says, I'm struggling with my Jewish faith, you can't say, well, let's convert you to Christianity, right?
Exactly.
But
Yes.
if a client comes in and is saying, hey, I'm struggling, I don't know, I want to rethink, and maybe that person should see a counselor who's trained in religion, certainly more deeply than the average clinician. Sure, you can do that. That's fine. But we cannot push our values of whatever they might be onto our clients.
Exactly. So a good point, because I thought one day I've got trained in ERP, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. And I do a
Do you want to talk
lot
about
of
what
it.
ER is real
ERP
quick?
is yes, it's exposure and response prevention. It's the main intervention used for people with OCD and obsessive compulsive disorder. And so I get a lot of referrals these days, and a lot of people come to me, or I discover that they have, at least if they're I get a lot of referrals for OCD, and a lot of times discover that people have obsessive patterns. And so anyway, though I do work with people who have scrupulosity, which scrupulosity is like believing that they have high standards for what their religious beliefs should be, and fear that they're going to do something wrong. And a lot of times it comes down to, I'm going to do something wrong, therefore I'm going to go to hell. But they'll create rules and stuff that don't, like, if I see a sign that says this, if I count this many times, or if I do this, say this thing, then that will mean it's okay and I won't go to hell. So they create a lot of rules. So scrupulosity. And I am always making sure that I am staying on the side of, we are looking with the things that aren't working for you. We are not touching your values. And I have sometimes people that I work with, if you are struggling with you think that your values are changing, that is something that we can't do. I can't talk to you about whether your values are wrong or right. Even if we had the same religious beliefs, I can't tell them whether their beliefs are wrong or right. That is not my job as a counselor. And so I always make sure, like, what do you believe? And if you feel like you're struggling with your value system and what you believe in, that is as a conversation you need to have with a pastor. That is a conversation that you need to have. Like, that is not my lane. And I don't care. Like I said, we could believe all the same things, but I can't say whether your values are right or wrong. Right.
Yeah. And it makes me think about, again, like what it is that we do in therapy. There's a lot of things about how we were trained as therapists that I've kind of changed my views on. Like, for example, a big idea about therapists is we should be a blank slate and not react. And I think to an extent we should be. Like, we shouldn't, whatever.
We don't
but I also think
we don't.
Exactly. Yeah. And what I mean by like blank slate is like, we were literally taught of like, if a client tells you something, you shouldn't have like an emotional or paraverbal or nonverbal reaction to it,
Right.
as to not lead the client to something, which I think sometimes is good, because clients have come in and told me things that I think is great news, and then it's not, and then there's that fissure. But there's other times, like, I've definitely have gotten or given like a look to the client of like, really? But anywho, but our job is not to, that's an aside, but our job is not to give advice. We are not advice givers. Advice is what you get from your friends or other, whatever, a professional you seek out for that. Our job is not advice. Our job is to help people discover what it is they want to do. I mean, DJ, how many times have you had clients say, well, what would you do if you were me? Or,
Right. Yeah.
or can you just
Right.
tell me what to do? And I'm like,
Right.
I can do neither of those things.
Right. I mean, like, I always say, like, can you imagine, like, if I did that, I'm not living your life. I can't tell you what to do
Yeah.
because I'm not living your circumstances. And imagine if I told you something and it went all wrong. There's a whole show about that called Shrinking with, I think we
Oh
talked
my
about it with
God.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, he does in the first season, all the wrong things. But I'm glad
It's
that
on
you
Apple
brought that.
TV. Yeah.
It is on Apple TV. It is pretty great. And Harrison Ford's in it. He
So cute.
also
Yeah.
plays a therapist, yeah. But I actually just again, and this is what you said, I'm working on a whole framework that I'm calling the coexistence framework, which
Mm.
is, that we don't have to be a blank slate. We don't have to pretend to be a blank slate. That two people can exist in a room together with different beliefs. They don't have to. If someone asks me, do you believe that? I'm going to start with saying, like, it doesn't matter what I believe. I believe that you should be able to believe what is right for you, and if you want to know my beliefs, I will share that, I'm not going to lie to you because that relationship doesn't work. Or if you need me to have some kind of openness for this relationship to work, I'm not going to shut completely down and be like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell you that. Right.
Yep.
And I know because of the fact that I had the privilege, I tell people, of transitioning in front of a caseload of people who were not queer. I don't think anybody, maybe one person on my caseload was queer. And I was going to be obviously changing in front of these people's eyes. So I had to talk about it. And they didn't have to believe that being transgender was right. They didn't have to know anything about it. They didn't have to we didn't have to share a belief. They didn't have to believe that I should be doing it. Like none of that had to be happening for me to say like, hey, changes are going to be happening. I want to let you know. I will let you ask some questions at an appropriate level. There are going to be some boundaries here, and like if it's
Sure.
something that I don't think that should be answered, I will tell you respectfully, right? And there were a couple of people on my caseload that I was not sure. I thought that I don't know if they're going to want to work with me after this, and not one person wanted to stop working with me, and not one person felt offended that how dare I be doing this, none of them,
Yeah.
because we don't have to be. I wasn't asking them. I wasn't saying I'm going to transition and I also need you to transition. So we're going to do this together. Let's all be transgender together.
Yeah.
My whole caseload, come with me. This is, I need to convert you. And I believe if you see me transitioning, you'll probably want to transition too. None of my clients did. And I've known a lot of them for 4 years now. None of them have felt like they needed to transition. None of them has said that now I've seen you do it, I think I want to do it too. It didn't happen. But we don't have to erase ourselves as therapists.
Yeah.
We don't have to be the same as the people that we're working with. What we have to have is respect. And what we have to do is know that we don't get to harm them because I believe that I know what is right for their life.
Yeah.
Right?
Exceptionally well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to, and another thing that's just an ingrained part of training for counselors, especially, is to not have self-disclosure. I think almost we were basically taught of like zero self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is never appropriate, instead of the nuances of like sometimes self-disclosure is okay, right? Like if a client asks me, hey, do you have kids? I may say, like we were kind of trained to say, what would it be like for you if I had kids? Or what would it be like for you? Tell me about the purpose of this question. But sometimes legitimately our clients just want to know about us as people.
Right.
And so it's
They
okay
need
to
to
be
know
like,
we're
I don't have
people.
kids.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly believe there's some clients, by the way, that I've worked with that like they don't want any self-disclosure. We have to be able to know. Like I've had people that they need me to be some kind of like, I am this therapist body that exists as a therapist, like,
You are not a real human.
And
you
I don't exist outside of this, and I have no life. And like I know who those people are. And I'm not going to self-disclose to them, but there are people who want to know. If I'm going to relate to you, I need to know that you're a person. I need to know that you've had human experiences. I need to know that like kids at least. Like I need to like, do you have kids adjacent somewhere in your life? Like, right? Have you
Well,
experienced any of these things? Right? Like,
well,
yeah.
yeah. And if I choose to give that self-disclosure, I mean, there's
Right.
certainly, I've worked in prison systems, and there's certainly times where I just do not disclose. If someone says, "Are you married?" I'm like, well, we're not going to go there. Like, it's unimportant, because that's about
Right.
safety. But
Right.
in general, if a client asks if I have kids and I say, "No, I don't have kids," like,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's my job, if that person is debating whether or not having children's for them, it's not my job to convince them
Right.
that child-free
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
the way to be
Yeah.
just
You
because that's
shouldn't
my
have. Right.
experience. And I'm like,
Exactly.
"Listen,
Yes.
I love doing whatever I want, whenever I want. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
killer. I don't have to change diapers. It's amazing, right?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna try to convince someone of that, because that's not their values and
Exactly.
their goals.
Right.
I cannot
Right.
impose mine on others, and not that
Right.
I value that
Right.
everyone be child-free,
Right. Right. Because
but
you
for my
can.
own.
Right? Because you can respect the fact that just because
Yeah.
something is right for you doesn't mean it's right
Mhm.
for everybody. And you don't have to be
Exactly.
like, "Oh my god, diapers are so gross," and why would
Why
you
would you wanna have
ever,
children?
right? Why would you ever want to do that,
Mhm.
There's so many differences that we could, cat people, dog people, like, and I think again,
Exactly.
the matter is that we have to believe, and as society, I mean, we can put this into the world. We have to believe that people know what's best for them. They may say
Mhm.
that, like, I'm struggling to find what's
Mhm.
best for me, but
Sure.
understand that, like, they're the leader in that. I don't give
Mhm.
them these things and say, here's what's best for you, because
Yeah.
it's just not how it works. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And that's not what we're trying to do, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody should feel like their job as a therapist is to have free speech, no matter what that does.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
we can't choose unethical intervention. So, like, for example, like, no, I doubt people would put in their documentation, "Oh, I practice conversion therapy," right?
Mhm.
But if I had this client who's debating having children, I'm not gonna do exposure therapy of making her listen to crying
Right.
babies for an entire session. That is
Exactly.
unethical and makes no
Mhm.
sense. It's the
Right.
same that if a client comes in and saying, "Hey, I'm questioning my identity," or I don't know, or I'm struggling with the shame and guilt I feel because of I know
Mhm.
that I'm queer. It would be unethical
Right.
to say, "Well, let's try to convince you that this is
Mhm.
actually a choice and it's a bad choice and you should make a different one." If a
Right.
client in general is making a choice that isn't great for them, it's still not my job to say,
Mhm.
"You're bad for that choice, let's
Right.
change it."
Right.
It's
Right.
exploring that.
And it is like that's such the foundation of a lot of the work I do with people with OCD,
Mhm.
because a lot of times people with OCD, right, they have thoughts that aren't logical or aligned with what they want. I'll ask
Mhm.
somebody, well, what do you want? Well, I want this, so clearly, so easily. But then they'll
Mhm.
go into all of these, like, ideas, the what ifs, what ifs, that, like, question all of it. And I'll ask them.
Mhm.
And I'll ask it more than once, because I need to make sure that this is what you're saying is
Mhm.
the value for you. And then,
Yeah.
when I'm doing the exposure, I am considering the thing that I asked you.
Mhm.
Do you want that? No. Do you believe that? No, I don't believe it. But my mind tells me,
Yeah.
all this stuff, right? So, and
Yeah.
again, I'm not giving them that value or belief. I have to get it
Mhm.
from them. And I need to make sure that that's the value belief they have, because they have all these other counter, like,
Yeah.
things that they say, like, aren't based on what they believe or want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'd be curious what happens next, what states
Yeah.
are the next to start to look at these, and hopefully, I mean,
Mm.
it wasn't even that long ago that conversion therapy had been banned,
Mhm.
but we saw the momentum of knowing this was wrong and deciding that in addition to being unethical, it should also be illegal. And so most
Mhm.
states have changed to that. And so I'm really
Mhm.
curious to watch the pendulum
Yeah.
swing. And, I hope that we right size or
Mhm.
right the ship here. I'm curious how this is going to pan out with the boards and getting ethical complaints and state
Mhm.
license boards and having actions on licenses. I think if you're a therapist, I really think you should, and if you're struggling with this, do some introspection, seek supervision, talk
Mhm.
to a peer group of of not a groupthink, a diverse peer group. If you are a client who or a person who just doesn't understand what this means, hopefully this podcast today shed a little bit of light on that.
Yeah. And if you are a professional who's listening and want to, get involved and change and working to advocate for not causing harm to our clients, find out how you can get it involved at like the state level and, writing to senators and representatives and all those sorts of things, because that is our job is also to be advocates. So, if you're not sure what to do, connect with your ACA or ASW or all the things to find out how you can get involved at the political, legal, why can I say that word?
Yes, legislator.
Yes, that legislative. That's the one is in that arena. So yeah.
And lastly, if you are a person and you're looking for affirming, queer affirming, gender affirming, sexuality affirming counselors, there are plenty out there. EJ, I don't know if you have a better suggestion. I'm a huge fan of Psychology Today. We're not sponsored in any way, but they have fantastic filters that you can filter what type of counselor you're looking for, what insurance. They have a little like about me. You can really determine, beforehand if you'd be a good fit for the client or good fit with that counselor.
You can do it on different platforms too. Like I use Grow Therapy platform or Headway platform, and you can also search. I know that I've gotten new clients through those places as well. So there's a lot of different places to get like telehealth or in-person care and have access to a lot of professionals who do gender affirming care.
Absolutely.
Or queer affirming. Yeah.
Well, we hope this was helpful in whatever way to understand how just a seemingly small decision is really impacting our profession. So we'd love to hear more from you all. Please remember to like, subscribe, send this to, share, friends, family, whatever. Always helps us grow our audience. Also, feel free to reach out or comment if there's things that you want to know more about or things that you agree or disagree with. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate you all so much, and we will catch you next time on Let's Pick This Up next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.